Welcome to Fun Facts Daily, your source for just the good stuff. Monday through Friday, we're bringing fun facts and news you can use, all carefully curated to uplift and inform. So give yourself a break, relax, and learn something awesome in just a few minutes every day. Hi everyone, I'm your host Kyle Wood. Today we'll be learning a bit about George Washington, the first president of the United States. Now, as a teacher, I know it's important to make time to learn new things every day. That's why I put out the podcast. But it's also important to take time to think critically and regularly question what we read, see, or hear. It's a fantastic habit for keeping our brains sharp, engaged, and healthy in the long run. So before we get into the facts, let's warm up our brains with a little challenge to see if you can tell truth from fiction. Consider this. Perhaps one of the most famous and enduring images of George Washington, aside from his portrait on the dollar bill, is that idea that he had wooden teeth. I guess it's just the ick factor that's made it stick in our minds for so long. We've seen it in cartoons and read it in storybooks for generations. This detail is often used to explain his tight-lipped expression in paintings, but is it an actual fact? We'll find out at the end of the episode. Now for your word of the day. Today's word is probity. Probity is the quality of having good, strong moral principles, honesty, and decency. It comes from the Latin word probitas, which means goodness or honesty. This is a word that's often used to describe George Washington. Throughout his life, from his time as a young surveyor to his role as the nation's first president, he was known for his unwavering integrity and commitment to doing what was right. His probity was the cornerstone of his leadership and earned him the trust and respect of his fellow countrymen. Although, ironically, one of the most famous stories of Washington's honesty, the one about him confessing to chopping down a cherry tree in his youth, was actually fabricated. It first appeared in Mason Locke Weems's book, The Life of George Washington, in the 5th edition printed in 1806, some years after Washington's death. Time for your daily high five, our top 5 fun facts about George Washington. Number 1. George Washington was a huge fan of ice cream and even owned his own ice cream making equipment. If you're wondering how they made ice cream, particularly in the summer before refrigerators and freezers were invented, back then people would harvest ice from natural sources like riverbanks during the winter, and they would store their ice in ice houses packed with insulation to preserve it as long as possible. The labor and resources required made ice cream in the summer an expensive treat. Long before ice cream was an accessible treat for everyday people, George Washington was an early and enthusiastic adopter. Historical records show that he spent a considerable amount of money on it. In one summer in 1790, records show he spent about $200 on ice cream. That would be the equivalent of thousands of dollars today. He enjoyed it so much that he purchased his own equipment to make it at Mount Vernon. At his home in Mount Vernon, Washington had a cream machine for ice and 2 pewter cream pots. Guests at his presidential residence in Philadelphia were often treated to ice cream, solidifying his status not just as a national leader, but a man of good taste. Number 2. George Washington was one of the most successful liquor distributors of his time. While we often picture Washington as a stoic and serious leader, he was also a savvy businessman and entrepreneur. After his presidency, he established a state-of-the-art whiskey distillery at his Mount Vernon estate. By 1799, it was the largest distillery in the United States, producing nearly 11,000 gallons of whiskey. This made him one of the most successful distillers of the young nation. He was constantly looking for ways to improve his farming operations at Mount Vernon, and the distillery was a way to turn his surplus grain into a valuable commodity, demonstrating his innovative and forward-thinking approach to business. Number 3. Washington was an incredibly skilled and fearless horseman. Throughout his life, George Washington was renowned for his exceptional horsemanship. Thomas Jefferson himself described him as, quote, the bravest horseman of his age, end quote. Washington took great pride in his horses and was often seen riding his magnificent white charger, Nelson, during the Revolutionary War. His commanding presence on horseback was a source of inspiration for his troops. His bravery in the saddle was legendary. During the Battle of Monongahela in the French and Indian War, he had 2 horses shot out from under him and his coat was pierced by 4 bullets, yet he remained unharmed. His combination of skill, courage, and a seemingly charmed life helped to build the mythos around him as a divinely protected leader destined for greatness. Number 4. George Washington was a major proponent of spies and intelligence gathering. George Washington understood that information was just as powerful as ammunition in winning the Revolutionary War. He established an extensive and sophisticated spy network known as the Culper Spy Ring, which operated in and around New York City, the British headquarters. This network used complex systems of secret codes, invisible ink, and dead drops to gather crucial intelligence on British troop movements and plans. Washington was personally involved in directing these espionage activities and was a master of counterintelligence, often planting false information to deceive the British. His use of spies was critical to several key victories, including the decisive Battle of Yorktown. And our 5th and final fun fact for today: George Washington is the only president to have been unanimously elected. In 1789, when the first presidential election was held, George Washington received a vote from every single elector. This unanimous decision has not been repeated in any subsequent presidential election. This incredible feat speaks to the immense respect and trust that the leaders of the newly formed United States had in George Washington. He was seen as the one person who could unite the disparate states and lead the country with wisdom and integrity. Even more remarkably, he was unanimously re-elected for his second term in 1792. Washington's widespread popularity and the universal faith in his leadership were critical in the fragile early years of the nation. He set the precedent for a strong and stable executive branch, and his willingness to step down after 2 terms established a cornerstone of American democracy. Now, here's a little bonus fun fact or interesting historical footnote about Washington's presidency. While George Washington was indeed the first president under the U.S. Constitution, he wasn't the first person to hold the title of President of the United States. Before the Constitution was ratified, the United States operated under the Articles of Confederation. During this period, there were several individuals who served as President of the United States in Congress assembled. This role was first taken by John Hanson, who served a full 1-year term from 1781 to 1782. It was largely ceremonial and involved presiding over the Continental Congress, managing correspondence, and signing official documents. Unlike the powerful executive office established by the Constitution, these early presidents had no real executive authority and primarily acted as facilitators for the legislative body. Now for some news you can use. Long before he was a general or a president, a young George Washington hand-copied a list of 110 rules of civility and decent behavior in company and conversation. These were guidelines for how to behave politely and respectfully. One of the most practical and timeless of these rules is, quote, "Speak not when others speak, sit not when others stand, and walk not when others stop," end quote. In other words, be attentive. Listen and pick up on social cues by mirroring people's behavior and treating others how they want to be treated. This is a wonderful piece of advice that is just as relevant today as it was in the 18th century. It's all about being aware of your surroundings and showing consideration for others. Whether you're in a classroom, a business meeting, or just talking with friends, paying attention to social cues and giving others your full attention is a sign of respect. It helps to create a positive and harmonious environment where everyone feels valued. Now for the moment you've been waiting for. At the beginning of the episode, I asked if that common story about George Washington having wooden teeth was actually true. While it's a fact that our first president had significant dental problems throughout his life, the idea that his false teeth were made of wood is a fallacy. The truth is actually far more complex and even more fascinating. Washington suffered from toothaches and began losing his teeth in his 20s. By the time he became president, he only had one natural tooth left. He owned multiple sets of dentures throughout his life, but none of them were made of wood. Instead, they were crafted from a variety of materials, including hippopotamus ivory, gold wire, spiral springs, and brass screws. Most notably, they also included real teeth from other humans and animals like cows and horses. The myth of wooden teeth may have come from the fact that the ivory he used would have become stained and grainy over time, giving a wood-like appearance. Now, I hope you enjoyed learning a bit about George Washington with me today. Be sure to tune in every weekday for even more fun facts. Fun Facts Daily is an Airwave Media podcast. It was written, recorded, mixed, and edited by me, Kyle Wood. Thanks for sharing a part of your day with me. Be sure to follow Fun Facts Daily on your favorite podcast app so you can keep the good stuff coming your way every day. And if you like the show, please do me a favor and leave a kind rating, review, or just tell your friends about it.